Welcome, citizens of the globe, to the Frontend Heroes podcast, where we discuss all things villainous and heroic about the front end of software development. My name is Evan Payne, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Scott Francis. How you doing, Scott?
Really well, thanks. New year, new beginnings, new start. Looking forward to this one.
I'm looking forward to it as well. Today's episode, as always, is sponsored by NetCentric, an award-winning Adobe Global Alliance partner. Both Scott and I work here as senior front-end software engineers, and we're glad, as always, to have their support with this show. This time around, we have some guests on our show. If you'd like to introduce yourselves first, Inez.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Ines. I'm a front-end software engineer at NetCentric, and I've been in a company for a while, been developing for a while, and actually I'm quite happy to join this show today.
Great. Thanks. Glad to have you. And Alvaro, can you introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name is Alvaro Saborido. I'm a front-end software engineer here, also in NetCentric, along with my colleagues. Really happy to be here. It's my first podcast, so I hope you enjoy it.
Great. So the topic of today's show, or the title, is Frontend Begins, a reference to Batman and the new series. And what we're talking about today is, hey, it's 2021. It's a new year. There's a new vision for us of what the future might hold. And yeah, we just want to start off and just talk about what we have to look forward to this year. What things are we doing to change the world around us and make it better? Scott, this kind of was your idea. Do you maybe want to kick things off with some of the things that you're looking forward to?
Yeah, sure thing. I actually, when I was thinking about this kind of goes back to the actual turn of the year and thinking, man, what do I want to achieve this year? Like, what have we got to look forward to? What are the things that we're going to be doing? And honestly, there was a little bit of me thinking, well, maybe I could get some advice from other people. Let's see what other people are doing as well. But for me personally, the beginning of the year is very much like, okay, where were we at the end of last year? And so for me immediately, and Inez will know what I'm talking about here. We have a project ongoing, which we worked on really hard towards the end of last year. Something that we want to get out to the community, and we want to really finish that off this year. My main focus in the next 2 months, excuse me, is to really get that project finished. And then I was thinking, well, where do I go from here? Is it time for me to learn a framework? Is it time for me to dive into TypeScript? These are all things that I've touched on in the past, but I don't feel that I'm an expert in any way. And so I was wondering, is this really going to be the time for me? They're my thoughts at the moment. So I don't know. What about you? What are the things that are on your plate?
Yeah, I will comment on one thing you said, which is TypeScript, and I think this is a good year to learn it. What I've been seeing, and like the React crowd has moved over to TypeScript now. I mean, not everyone, I'm guessing, but I've seen a lot of these people that are traditionally like, yeah, let's just write React all the time. They're doing TypeScript and they're teaching TypeScript and all of that. So that market share is growing exponentially. And yeah.
I think you always see these things on Twitter. You see links to articles like, the 10 things you must learn in 2021. And I think, God, you get like real overkill with those things. And, they're all kind of the same and a little bit overblown as well, I think. But the one thing that I see is I see TypeScript, and I had experience with it before, like working on a project that you were on as well, Evan. And I think I saw the value of it there. And now I think, well, I've been in like a kind of legacy project for a while. Could I start switching over to TypeScript? It's really something that I think I'm not a big believer in, like jumping into technologies like without them being established or anything like that, or like new ways of working. But for me, TypeScript seems to have taken hold and really does seem like the thing that's going to be worthwhile learning.
Yeah, I mean, we'll find out. I do have my own opinions, and maybe I'll branch into them later, but I want to make sure our guests speak as well. Inez, we'll start with you too. What do you see? What are you excited to, explore, get into this year?
Well, this year actually started quite interesting. Last year, as we all know, it was terrible for all. It was for me as well. Like end of last year was a bit, like motivation down and everything. But I got asked a few years ago, what do I want to specialize in? And I gave it quite a thought, like, okay, what is going to be as a front-end developer, just to dig deeper into some topic, a bit specialized. And after quite some thought, I decided on web performance. That was something that was always super interesting to me, also me being a telecommunications engineer and all. And I've been working a bit towards this, but out of the sudden this year, the things, and the last year actually, because the project Scott was mentioning is actually about progressive user experience and web performance. So the things started moving. It kicked off quite nicely. And actually this year looks quite promising, especially when it comes to finally releasing something to open source. So I'm really looking forward to this. And we're just generally working on this topic of making web faster, and nicer for everyone.
Yeah, I was going to follow up there of what actually is it that this means for you? Like what does your day-to-day work look like if you're specializing in this kind of a topic?
So at the moment, we actually created a small team that revolves around the topic, which is quite cool. And at this point, so like last weeks, I've been working on few tools like this. So we've been developing one tool to measure data, which we're also cooperating with the machine learning team, which is super exciting. And as well as that, we're also developing this tool for progressive experience. So, and of course, everything that goes around it, some documentation, best practices. So yeah, quite a lot on the plate, but again, super exciting.
Yeah, that's really cool. We'll also cycle back around to some of that, I'm sure, Alvaro, but what are you looking forward to in this year?
For me, this year is pretty exciting. The last year I ended up, it was a tough year, but for me professionally, I was able to focus on things that I wanted to do. And for the end of the year, I was able to deliver my Vue library in open source. I was pretty proud of it. Finally, Vue 3 support. I attend some Vue events globally. That was pretty nice. Thanks for the community to invite me and so on. And now I have an insight of what the future holds. And for me, this year is exciting because a lot of new front-end tools are coming along. And as Scott commented, TypeScript is hitting hard also in the Vue environment. Everything in Vue 3 is completely TypeScript support and a lot of cool tools. So right now, I'm doing a lot of stuff in the open source world. Sharing with another colleagues that are doing open source. I'm super glad that you guys also are preparing this library, the progressive one, to the open source. It's tough, but it's quite exciting to have your code and the library have users that can give you feedback about it and improve. It's quite a nice journey. So I'm pretty excited of this year, to be honest. A lot of new cool stuff is coming.
Yeah. So from my side, I'm looking forward to things like getting deeper into Vue and the composition API. Starting to look at these improvements upon reactivity systems. And one of those that comes to mind, we had on a previous episode, Ignacio, to talk about it, is Svelte. I see Svelte as taking off big time this year, and I'm not going to learn it and use it on all my production projects. But I think for little one-off projects to keep myself up to speed on it, I'm going to be reaching for that tool frequently. And one of the reasons I'm excited about the improvements to reactivity is because they start to put the focus back onto the users and not just the development experience. So, we had these frameworks that come up to make the developers' lives easier. There are things that can be done quickly that would have taken a lot of code. And while there are sometimes, trade-offs that are acceptable there, you end up with maybe larger bundle sizes, and you end up with workarounds that, while it's easier to develop with, are slower to run in the browser or something like that. And these new ways of doing it are removing code rather than adding code. And I quite like that. I think that's opening up the playing field and making, I don't know, I just think it's better for the users. So.
And not only that, but I found that in previous years there was this war between all the frameworks, but they were more like the users that say, hey, my framework is better than yours. But the actual creators, like, for example, Evan Yu, is working along with the Svelte ones. I don't remember the name of the creator, but they are working along for a lot of plugins and core base code for all the reactivity. I mean, for example, Byte, that is a new ES bundler that it creates hot reloads in the dev environment without having to bundle and roll up and so on. They work for React, they work for all frameworks. So we are not talking just only improvements in some of the frameworks, but the whole ecosystem is starting to share the same stuff. The reactivity system of Vue, for example, is open to be used not only in Vue, in any other framework that you want. It's a different package. So I like that approach that now things are going more agnostic.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I think that Evan alluded there that maybe the focus before was on with these things was on the developer and not the user, not the end user. But really, that was something that needed to shift, and I think that is definitely something that, going back to what Inez said about majoring in web performance, that's something that's really going to, like, when the focus gets on that instead of like how we as developers can do things quickly rather than the user doing things quickly. And I think that's a better state to be in. So it's great to hear that there's all these things that, regardless of the tool you're using, there's improvements made to them, which will end up being passed on to the end user. So I think it's a good win all around.
Yeah, another thing that I've seen growing and taking off are things like the Jamstack, where you're moving a lot of the rendering over to the server side. And I mean, there's a whole buzz about that now. Like, everything that's old is new and so on. Where someone posted a tweet from, some semi-famous person on Twitter saying, we're basically doing this thing and it's going to be so cool. It's going to change how we do web development. And really we're going to send HTML over the wire instead of JSON. And it's like, that's what we've been doing for most of web development history. But it's good. I mean, a paradigm shift and doing things what we did in the past, but doing it again in a improved and having a deeper understanding of it is good. I'm looking forward to those kind of things as well. Inez, maybe to talk more about web performance in particular. I mean, we've discussed this on previous shows, but these new ways of measuring web performance, what's been your experience with them? I mean, we talked with a previous guest about the stuff that Adi Osmani has been pushing forward and the core vitals and stuff. Are those going to last this year? Is that, do you think, or will they continue to adapt and change?
Yeah, I'm actually quite excited as well about it because they're pushing towards user-centric, and everything that's user-centric, I think it's really, really good as well. Like whatever, like all the stuff you guys were talking about so far. So getting everything like more performant and smaller and not just super nice to develop. Again, as a developer, I like the super nice environment to develop, but then again, it has its trade-off. And when it comes to all this web, especially in web performance, everything is a really, really fine balance, between this, like how fancy and nice and, with a really, really good developer experience you want. And then again, how well a user experience do you want in the end? So introducing the core web vitals was quite a nice thing for me because all these like new ways of measurements, are. I think they're going in a really right direction. So first time I heard, for example, for cumulative layout shift, it was not only from my developer side, it was from my user side where I was like, oh yeah, that's great. I was like, I hate when it jumps around. So, and I've seen a lot of times when we do a web performance audit and see this, it's a lot of times it's just like these big shifts that are just jumping up and down, and it's just kind of distracting to you. So this is, for example, the one I'm quite excited about, and yeah, I think it's the good way to go.
Yeah, definitely.
I think that especially with the core Web Vitals, what it really does is it starts bringing performance it brings performance metrics to people who are not necessarily developers in a way of like easy of understanding. Like you can sell the core Web Vitals to anybody in the process, really. Like the thing you mentioned there, Ines, like cumulative layout shift. Like everybody who uses the web is going to have experienced this. It doesn't matter whether you're a developer, whether you're the CEO of a company, or you're leading a team in a bank, where a web team in a bank. You're a user. You're going to have experienced this, and like that problem's always existed, and maybe maybe we've taken care of it because we see that as good development, but maybe other people have just said, well, that's just the way the web works. That's just a page loading. But this is actually like putting it front and center, and saying that this is the level you're at now. You're on red, like, and any CEO is going to see this and say, well, I want to be green. And it's just something that makes it like really like easy for people to understand. And I think that the importance that Google have put into this, they've really given it like a lot of weight by saying I think that this comes into play for Google search rankings. So already like there's something that developers can focus on in the coming months, the first few months of the year. If you're not already like taking care of your core Web Vitals, then now is really the time. And I think it's a real easy sell to your clients. Like certainly I've already had discussions looking at getting performance work done aimed specifically at core Web Vitals for the first few months, getting ready for May. Like it's a definite deadline. So I think it's definitely something that we'll be focusing on in this year.
Yeah, I completely agree with this. Yeah, and it's also one thing that I definitely want to see in the future, like I'm hoping for in the future, is to have more support, especially when it comes to all these topics such as web performance and accessibility and similar, from the business side, because a lot of times we as developer have to take care of it, but then if you don't have a support and if you every time have to explain this thoroughly, it gets overwhelming. And exactly what you said, that this is bringing it kind of to everyone. It's really easily understandable for everyone. I guess this is a big plus for this, against to get everyone, on board, to get all hands on deck and to actually make a difference from the start of development process, and not when everything is done and you actually realize you're not doing well. And then it's like, oh, let's try to fix this. And yeah.
Well, one thing that I in previous years, when the progressive web apps, the PWAs, were building some traction, a lot of frameworks offered sort of 100% Lighthouse score out of the box, right? You set up a new project and you start clean slate with 100%. I mean, I'm guessing there will be frameworks now, or things like Eleventy, another static site generator, that really can offer that already out of the box for these as well. You're already green, and that's so much easier to build into the development of what you're doing. If you're able to start fresh this year and start with a greenfield project and use one of these things that has already your core vitals all in the green, then you don't have to fix it later. You just make sure you're keeping that in a good place. I'm looking forward to seeing how that whole portion of the market builds and grows.
No, it is growing, because right now, for example, on my webpage is an example, my portfolio. I had it in Vue before, and I changed it for another stack with Nuxt. It's a static web page generator that built on top of Vue. And my score was perfect from the beginning. So for me, okay, I searched between nodes and the core code to understand why it was giving me the green, but it was ready to go from the beginning. So as a user, for example, that doesn't know that much about performance or that much about accessibility, it helps delivering projects with that already. And that's a big support. As we were talking about, some companies or clients don't appreciate all the effort for accessibility and for a good performance. And the market is going to a point that you need to have it in order to publish it. You need to have a base accessibility for all your users. You need a nice web performance to be able to convert. So the community is going forward to this, and all days there is a new tool, there is a new way to do things that improves that process and make it easier. So I guess we are going to get to that point that companies will give you budget for it, and it will be easier to justify why we are doing this, why we need a good performance, why we need a total support AA accessibility standard for it. I'm pretty excited about it. I'm pretty pleased that we are going that way because it's needed. We need to do web applications for all of users.
Yeah, I think that really is going to help immensely. And it leads into the next topic I have, which probably will carry us through because it's a big one, which is there's going to be a whole bunch of people this year that are just starting to learn the front end. So their first experience in developing stuff for the web and doing things on the front end is going to be in 2021. What must that be like? And we've already touched on so many things that I'm sure each of us was not exposed to for at least a few years into the start of our career. You know, performance, accessibility in particular, which we should be. But on top of that, we're learning HTML and the way data attributes work and JavaScript and all of that madness and frameworks and CSS frameworks. And the field has gotten so big, but you somehow need to know a lot of it as well. I mean, how do you think that is going to affect people that are coming in? What is a junior in 2021 going to be doing with themselves this year to catch up with everything that's happening?
Can be certainly overwhelming. If it's already overwhelming for more senior developers like us, sure, a junior entering right now into the web development world is like, okay, I have to understand all of this. But yeah, I mean, the advice I always give to people that approach me and say, hey, I want to learn web development. What should I do, right? Some people say, okay, you need to learn the basics. I go to approach that, try to build something, okay? Try to build an app little by little, and then you go to the concepts or the core concept of why that's working. For me, all this sort of 8 years of learning has been my mojo and the way I learned it, and it worked for me, right? The best way is to take some technology that bring you a bell. Let's say React. You enter the development world and you hear everyone's using React or everyone's using Vue. Okay, start doing some tutorials, start doing some courses about it and learn about it, and then move to another place. Do side projects, try to get into a company that you can start practicing it, and so on. And little by little, another good advice will be try to not overwhelm yourself about knowing everything. I still don't know a lot of stuff, like microfountains, for example. The other day we were talking about it. I'm not an expert on it. I know the concept that I haven't implemented, and I still have 8 years working on the business. So you always have new things to learn, and that's the excitement part, right? If we learn everything from the scratch, it will be pretty boring.
I would jump in there and, like, for me, if you're just coming into the industry now, I would say exactly what Alvaro said. Don't get bogged down in what you don't know. Really recognize that if this is you starting out a career, then man, this could be a long career. So better to set off on the right path. Recognize that you don't have to do everything in like a year, and you won't do everything in a year. I would definitely be somebody who is saying like, okay, get your fundamentals right. I think like it's old. It's like perhaps an old way of looking at things, but it's true of anything. Like, just don't run before you can walk. Like, make sure that you know what you're doing with the core technologies, and then after that, you can start looking at what, as Alvaro said, what rings your bell. Like, what is it that that you want to get out of things? But really, you got to start with your fundamentals. I mean, like, you can get like really specific at things. You can really major in things like later down the line. Like Inez is now like majoring in performance. Like, that decision wasn't taken in her first year in development. It comes like after time. But the main thing is get your fundamentals right and don't beat yourself up over what you don't know, because you shouldn't expect to know everything.
Okay, really, really thank you for this all, because I'm actually now going to give you some stuff from the field directly. My sister is trying to learn web development at the moment, so I just had a 3-hour session with her last night explaining her everything about how browsers work. So this is actually a topic I've been in for the last few weeks, kind of trying to help her with this whole, syllabus, like how to, like which course to take, how to actually do it. And with her having like slim to none knowledge, like previous knowledge. So she did some HTML and CSS, and that's it. So they didn't even explain her on that course what's the difference between front end and back end. So that was kind of, first of all, I was trying to determine how, like, what she knows. And then we just started from scratch. And as a responsible older sister and responsible developer, I kind of started with exactly what Scott said, drill on the basics. So for me, it's really, really important for her to actually have the good basics before she goes into any coding, because a lot of times I do hear people, yeah, I started web development and I don't know, I just took Vue. And I was like, no, that's not the way to go. That's just like, as we use this reference now a lot with the progressive, like a layer on a cake, that's something extra. But like, do your JavaScript first, get to know the basic, get to know some, like even data structures, algorithms, all this, a bit of this basic stuff that's in the end of the day going to make you a great developer, not just someone who can do it, but someone who can do it right. So this is something I'm kind of trying at the moment to transfer this knowledge to my sister, which just brought me to the fact that I know nothing. And that all my front end knowledge is like, there's so much more, and it's so much more coming every day. So it's like, it's super overwhelming, even for me who, studied that and was in, like, I am in industry for a while. And I was just, you're not going to do this alone, because you're gonna, I don't know how anyone can actually do this alone. It had to be like super, super hard without any guidance. So yeah, I hope I'm going to be a good guide.
Well, I think it depends. So I'm not in full agreement with you, actually, but I think it depends on the personality, so the type of learner they are, and also the time constraints. So I agree with you and Scott. If you want to do it right and you have sort of a tighter deadline, you need to just buckle down and study the fundamentals. And to a degree, that's also if you're that kind of person. But I'm not, and I wasn't. That's not how I got here. I, over the course of multiple years, learned everything that I knew just by doing projects. And I didn't take any courses. Every time I tried, I was like, I would tune out. The videos were boring to me. I've even tried recently, like to pick up some things, and it's just, I don't learn that way. I personally, and this is where it gets into the type of learner you are. I need to have a project in front of me, a goal that I'm aiming for, and to do my best through sticks and glue to get myself there. Then I pick up certain things. And the downside to that is it ends up being instinctual, the things that you learn. But at the same time, you do pick up on patterns. And if you talk and you give talks and you return your knowledge to the community, you solidify the things that you did learn as well. It's two different paths. I'll put it that way. And yeah, I think one of the problems that new people that are starting with is they want to do it fast. And if you're doing it this way, if you're doing it my way, it's not going to be fast. It takes a long time just trying things bit by bit. But I'll finish off my rant here. On the same side, these frameworks and these new kind of starter kits that they're coming up with now, those are going to be really helpful. You install a Nuxt project. Yeah, it's a lot of little things to pick up on. And yeah, it's maybe not the fundamentals like you should be having, but they have a right way to do a lot of things. Angular being an example of that as well for a framework. Yeah, it's super complicated to pick up, but there's only kind of one or two ways to accomplish things. And you know that it's a proven model by which to develop things.
I could see why people would dive into that, like have the kind of dive in approach as well when they're first starting out. I mean, say you're 21 and you've decided that this is the industry for you, and then you start working for a company, but also like the company's just helping you to get a start, and maybe you have other ideas about like, oh, I could build this app and I could sell this app. I mean, really, like I would encourage anybody to do that immediately. I'm telling people to get the fundamentals, but also if you're going to take a chance on something, if you're going to try and build something, you have an idea, then do it when you have no commitments. Do it when you're young and you have the time. And that's something that like frameworks can really help you with. If you can work a day job, but then you've got your side projects as well, and that's something that's really driving you forward. And for sure you're going to do that while you have the time. And I would encourage people to do that really like at the beginning of their career, because that's the time that you're going to take your chances.
Yeah, I completely agree. So like, don't get me wrong. I'm all hands, up for, hands-on approach. So I did give like last year two courses on the web developer for complete beginners. And I think one of the best comments were like, you're super hands-on. So yeah, definitely like just go and do it. So my task for my sister at the moment is to, do some, Git exercise. So I found a really cool, this kind of like sandbox that teaches you how to use Git. So like from the next week on, we can actually coach. She can send me pull requests and I can kind of through these pull requests, I can give her tasks and she can, and I can on that basically, drill her on some, best practices and stuff like this. So that's for me, definitely like you need to be hands-on. You need to be building stuff. For me, again, like that's the best part of being developer is actually building stuff. But then again, also one thing that happened to me is that during my university, I never actually had a language to code in. So I did some Java, but I did this just basically, more of the concepts and algorithms and structures, but, not in a language. And my first piece of JavaScript I ever wrote was my application for Netcentric. And at one point I just came to the place where, yeah, I know my JavaScript, but I just know how to write it. And I started reading a book, The Eloquent JavaScript. And I'm like, oh my God, I haven't known all this stuff. And like by reading this book, out of the sudden, I became way better developer because I just knew how some stuff work under the hood. So again, like, yeah, if you want to go fast, that's definitely just go try to break it and everything. But then at one point, I just believe that at that point where I took this book and actually went to some theoretical stuff and how things work, I just became way better developer.
Nice.
Especially when you face bugs, for example, or features, knowing a framework or a way to build something is good. But you need that theoretical part. That's why I mentioned that I normally, when I want to learn something new, okay, I read some documentation. Let's say I want to learn right now about web components, right? I know the concept, but I want to try it. So what I'm going to do, take a sandbox, try to build something that I can see following a tutorial or whatever, and then learn why it's working. What are the core concepts, right? Why is this happening? What is the shadow DOM, etc. But yeah, as Evan mentioned, I think it's something depends on each person. I cannot say that my way of learning will help other developers necessarily. Everyone has a different way to learn. I know people that can eat a book and then start programming and do it one way, and there are other people that are drive through experience and they know the theory. Also, I think now there are more ways to learn web development than before. There are a cool trend on Twitter recently that people are learning through challenges, like 100 days challenge, and they create small like code pens, like small snippets of code that are meant to do something, and they learn through that, and they're learning the basic. Some developers are learning, for example, creating CSS games. It's also a trend that they learn CSS through games. So right now, I think it's a good moment to get into programming, actually. It's easier than before. There is a lot more to know, that's true, but there's also more tools or more resources to learn from.
I definitely think that rings true for me. I mean, like, if for me now, I don't honestly see like such big value in getting a university degree to work in our field. I think what our industry has done has really provided resources to actually get educated in this, to get educated in front end, and to be able to do it and to do it well, without the need to go to university. And I think that more and more people will find our industry appealing because of that. If the choice is go to university and spend a huge amount of money to get a degree, or do like self-taught, or go to code academies for even 6 months or a year, the alternative, as an alternative, I think then that really opens up the industry to a lot more people than having to rely on, oh, you need to go to university and get a degree to even be considered to go into this field. I mean, like, it's I think the industry itself has done a great job in opening the pathways to come into it.
One more thing I would just like to add on this is that I've got this question, how to start web development a lot of times. And a common pitfall that I do see with people is trying to find the best course, the best way to do it and everything. And my advice usually is just do it. Just pick one. Doesn't matter which one. You're just going to, it's just an outline for your learning. As soon as you start learning, you start Googling more and trying out some new stuff and all that stuff, but just take one and go. Just don't spend, 2 months on deciding which web development course to take, which one is the best, reading reviews and everything. Is just, take one, because a lot of them has a lot of effort put by other people, and most of them are really good, just a bit different, and just go for it.
Yeah, I agree with that completely, because I think a lot of people come into this thinking it's maybe more scientific because it's computer based, and that, like, learning chemistry or biology, there are like set rules in stone, and when we even talk about fundamentals as if they're solid cornerstones of this. And I mean, honestly, I think the true fundamentals of computer science are way removed from our day-to-day life in developing websites. I mean, it's the infrastructure upon which the internet is built, and it's the input and outputs of computer signals that are the true foundation. The HTML and CSS and JavaScript, while super important, is a bit fluid. It changes. I mean, yeah, we're on HTML5 now, but new stuff is added, stuff is deprecated all the time. It's not as it's not like that. It's a different sort of discipline. So yeah, just dive into whatever course and start to wrap your head around the concepts, because you won't ever know it all. I'm going to cut that line of discussions short, and I want us to go into one final phase of, and I'm going to put you on the spot here as well, which is, do you have a challenge that you would like to give to the broader front-end community for this year? Something, hey, aim for the stars. Maybe you can achieve it this year. I will start. Mine would be container queries. Please container queries. I have high hopes because it was on one of those, CSS surveys, the highest requested feature. I just think it's super important for us to finally get container queries so that we can use components the way they're meant to be used, which is to say not just based off of the width of the browser window, but based off of the parent that they're inside of. That would be great. Guys, just do that for me and I'll be super happy. Who wants to go next? Alvaro?
Actually, I was going to sell the same one. I'm really hoping for it. The last one I was hoping was optional chaining, and it's already there in almost everything. So this is like the CSS one that I want.
Okay, that's fair. Scott?
Man, this really is putting me on the spot. What do I want to see? It's a really tough one. I mean, you do cover a good one there. Which I have to say, we've kind of got working in all projects. We have found a way of doing this, but yeah, out of the box, I think it would be really nice. For me, I think I would like to see real progress on lazy loading sections or components of applications, particularly just like a browser-based website, not a single-page application, just a website, and actually getting so that we can, by default, defer what's actually loaded in initially. I've read some articles recently about a pattern to make this, to actually do this, but imagine if the browser took care of that, like out of the box, like you put all your components onto a web page and it lazy loaded what it needed. I think that would just be, like, performance wise, that would just be amazing for everybody. Like, you only load what you want and what you need at that particular time. The rest comes later. That would just be amazing if we could get somewhere like that.
Yeah, and I mean, that is a great one as well. The single page applications are moving towards that. I know Angular has this. It's a possibility with the new Ivy renderer of doing lazy loaded components as opposed to just full modules. But as you say, having it sort of native to the browser as well would be fantastic. What about you, Inez? A challenge for the broader community to work on this year?
I think I'm going to go with a really, really hard one, which is get your web vitals in green.
Nice. Yeah, enough said, really. Yeah,
just totally makes sense.
Oh. Can I read that article without shifting? I think that would be awesome.
Yeah, that's great. Cool. Okay, so next up is our segment True Heroes. In this segment, we want to highlight a few true front-end heroes that are working across the planet and thank them for all that they do. This time around, Alvaro has in particular nominated a guy called Anthony Fu. He works in part of the Vue.js core team and, as far as I know, maintains a helpful plugin that helps you move or already use the composition API in Vue 2, so you can ease your way into learning about that. But Alvaro, do you want to explain some more?
Yeah, I've been contributing with him in some of his open source plugins, and he just created a lot of cool stuff. He's working in Byte also, and BytePress as a static generator with Byte, the newest I'm involved. And he creates a lot of plugins that help you deliver better quality and more easily. So I don't know. I do admire a lot of people in the community, but recently I find out a lot of these plugins and I start contributing with him, giving ideas, feedback, and he's really nice to talk with on the repo conversations and so on. So I just promote him as a front-end hero for this session.
Yeah, that's it's really nice when people are engaged and open source, and this is one of the guys that sort of highlights that. So thank you so much for all the work that you do. Any proper hero is a well-rounded one, and so we want to share some simple musical picks. So Scott, we'll start with you. What's the favorite thing you've been listening to lately?
Oh, well, there's a record label out of New York called The Uprise. And honestly, like I heard about this and I heard a couple of songs, and it's like pretty heavy electronic dance music. But there's no one artist that I could pick out. But while coding, I'm not even sure whether like this is my type of music. But while coding, I've got some of this on Spotify, and I was like, just like foot tapping, head bobbing, and happily coding away. So there's no particular artist, but I'd say check out the record label, The Uprise, and yeah, that'd be my pick.
Awesome. Thanks. Inez, how about you?
So I think for a few years now, my definite coding go-to is this, let's say, instrumental covers of like generally anything. And I found out about the genre, let's say, through this, it's a kind of a band. It's not a band, but they're called Two Cellos. So they are Croatian Slovenians. So that's basically when they became famous on Croatian scene. That's how I kind of found out about it. And then, of course, Spotify did its good algorithm, which kind of brought me as well to, from Lindsey Sterling, David Garrett and everything. But I still, like every day when I start coding, it has to start with the Supermassive Black Hole from Two Cellos. That's just, it does have lyric, that one, but then it's like, after you scream Supermassive Black Hole for 3 minutes, then you're ready to code.
Hey, maybe you could give that as advice to new starters to the industry.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Try that. Awesome. Drive your energy from the hole.
And it's funny that that is actually good advice, is find some music that puts you into a state of flow. And Scott, you obviously have listened to some of my recommendations, because this last year or so, EDM has been my go-to genre, apparently, or so says Spotify. The one that I want to recommend is this Japanese artist called Nato, Nhato. The album, latest one from 2019, is called Trace of Will. I don't know what it is about it. It certainly keeps me in the zone coding wise, and there are these drops where you just get excited. I'm really into that. It's I don't know. It's awesome. And yeah, as you say, having these to keep you going is great. We'll see if Alvaro, can you say something? We'll see if we can hear you. If not, we will move on.
Hey, I'm back. Sorry.
Okay. No problem. You just missed listening to our awesome electronic dance music recommendations and Two Cellos. I'll toss it over to you then. What is your musical pick for the last month or so?
Musical wise, listening to a lot of electronic, actually. And there is a remix of a meme song. There is a guy with some drums, and there is a cat there. And some awesome guy in internet made a remix about it, and it's awesome.
Okay. Well, we'll put a link to that somehow if we can. And I want to toss out there as well the sea shanty thing that's been going around, the Wellerman. Man, that was in my head for ages. And someone also did an electronic remix of that, which also is part of the loop that's stuck in my head. So great. Okay, it looks like that's all the time we have for today, folks. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed the show, you should hard to star us in your podcatcher of choice. Those reviews and ratings are how the fancy algorithms help people find our content, and the power to help is within you. If you have any questions or topics you want covered in our next episode, send a tweet to us at Heroes Frontend on Twitter, and we'll add it to our list. Until next time, heroes, remember, with great front-end power comes great responsibility. See you next time.